It's mad static. And I'm sad. The new Saints Row. It's pretty bad. The 2022 release of Saints Row is a reboot of the series after a damn near decade since the last main title. From the get-go, the games had a lot of disapproval from fans of the series, for a lot of different reasons, some more valid than others. But it also had a lot of support from people who were excited to see how it turned out. As for me, well, as much as I like this series and everything that had been set up to that point, a reboot just kinda made the most sense. I really don't know where else they could have gone after becoming fucking ruler of the galaxy, so I was more in the excited optimistic crowd, given that the game kept the two most important things to the series: crazy customization and combat. That being said, I did also have my own worries for the game. From the pretty sizable chunk of stuff we were being shown, the reboot was looking most similar to the third game in the franchise, which ain't bad, I love that game, but that meant while we were probably getting some good ass gameplay, we were probably getting some ass cheek story. If it managed to surprise me, that'd be cool, but I didn't have much faith on that front. Bigger than that though is its take on the genre in general. I don't know if you noticed, but there hasn't been a lot of games like Saints Row for a while now. Funnily enough, a month after Saints Row 4 came out, GTA 5 came out and pretty much killed the crime open world genre. Mafia and Watch Dogs are the rare exception, but open world crime has kind of become like stealth or RPG mechanics, where it feels like they've become utilized in a lot of different game types instead of being a game type all of their own. So my worries were on how the game was going to reinvent itself, while still feeling like Saints Row. If the game couldn't manage to do that somehow, then I feared that the reboot would feel stuck in a 7th generation game design. But now that the game is out and I've gone thoroughly through it, I can say no, this game doesn't feel like an outdated PS3 game. It's so much worse, it feels like a modern fucking Ubisoft game. Now granted, it's not the worst thing ever. I know absolute garbage, and this ain't it. But it has been a long time since a game has let me down this bad. We haven't even started the game yet, and we've already got a befuddling backstep on our hands. Looking at the cover art for this game, we can see a whole lot of not purple. The Saints are still wearing purple, it's their main theme. Why is no one using it? It's such a cool color too, and it really helped to make the third and fourth games stand out. It's not important, but like, come on. What am I supposed to feel looking at this? To start things off, the story doesn't take place in Stillwater or Steelport anymore. Our gang's now based in Santo Ileso, and starts off with just 4 friends: Kevin, Nina, Eli, and you. The 4 of them are extremely talented in their own right, but are living pretty unhappy lives at the moment, as they barely manage to make rent, are working at jobs they are less than enthusiastic about, and are working for a bunch of assholes. So when shit starts to hit the fan, they're left with the short ends of the stick, and these jobs that they don't even like start to conflict with their friends' lives. They're like, fuck it. Putting their heads together, they form their own gang in the Saints and work to build up their business, recruit members, and take out the rival factions in the Idols, Los Panteros, and Marshall Security. Alright, let's bite this bullet and get it out of the way. The story is not good. At all. It's bad. Kinda ass. I don't even really want to talk about it, because there's too much I could go over, like the characters, the pacing, the theming, the tone, but to be honest, it would feel kind of useless. First of all, it's clear this story isn't taking itself seriously, but moreover, all of these criticisms would just serve as extra topics that coat over the primary problem. Good or bad ideas, faithfulness, overall impact and intent, like I talked about for the first and second game, none of that shit really matters when at its core, the writing sucks. It's abysmal. The dialogue is cheesy and embarrassing, and not in the ironic, self-aware sense, in a painful way. Out of the plethora of jokes they try to land in this game, I can think of 2 that made me exhale faster than usual, while the rest kinda made me want to stop playing the game.
Mimic?
Don't fucking touch that! That's not loot!
It's a Dark Souls reference, man. I have simple pleasures.
It feels like these are actually supposed to be relatable conversations, as if I'm supposed to think these guys are cool and funny and actually like these people. But I don't like these people, and it's not their fault. It's because, again, the writing sucks. It's as if cool and generally nice friends are all these 4 ever have to their character. It's all they are, with quirky attributes, and cracking a quip every time they talk is supposed to serve as actual depth and nuance. I don't hate these characters, but I never actually care about this group either. To give the game credit, they do try to create care and put us through missions that build likability for each of the cast, but it doesn't work because the writing fucking sucks. The dramatic and heartfelt moments of this game don't feel genuine and come across as fake, almost inappropriate sometimes, and not in the giant dildo sense. Spoilers, I guess, but there's this moment where Nina's car dies, and there's this emotional moment where she goes over what it meant to her, and yeah, that's really rough. I'm sorry about your mom. But we done killed like 50 baby mamas on the way around here, so nah, I don't really care about your mom's car. Or you for that matter. Loot Row narrative dissonance hits like a dump truck here, because I don't know what they're aiming to make me feel. When I'm over here ending countless lives, I definitely don't care about the group's day-to-day inconveniences. If the story is not anything to be taken seriously, which it's clearly not, and is just supposed to be like a fun and comical ride with some heart sprinkled in here and there, that would be fine. The problem is they didn't achieve that either, because one last time everyone, all together now, the writing sucks. Well, those are my thoughts on the story, so now we gotta give credit where credit's due. I've said a few times now that I think customization and chaos are the core of this series, and they do customization justice here. Mostly. The character creator is pretty good, when it works. Some people say it's awful because you can make Oblivion faces, but actually, that's 100%. 200% a positive. You can make a normal human being if you want to, but it's superb to have the option to make an abomination. As for clothing, yeah, that was a miss. They brought some level of detail from the first two games back, which was appreciated, but most of the options I saw were understated casual wear that didn't really suit me, or something straight up dumb, which in the end I kinda opted for. I also don't like how there are a bunch of clothes stores that only have like 5 or 6 items. That was just annoying, to make like long trips to some store and then find nothing of interest. There's base and gang customizers, which are pretty surface level, but nice inclusions nevertheless. But the car and gun customization are pretty great upgrades from what came before, visually at least. I would have appreciated more ways to pick which parts of their performance I want to improve, but appearance-wise, almost every part of your cars and guns allow you to tailor them to your liking. It's an impressive amount of detail here that I really wish was in more games. Any other game, honestly. Sancho Ileso itself? Pretty nice city, I gotta say. I'm not a super big fan of the long-ass bridge smacked in the middle of it, or the sheer abundance of desert bloating this game's world, but the landmarks within that mass of sand make for fun exploring, and the actual city areas do the same, with very detailed and immersive city streets and alleys. Personally, I still wouldn't say it reaches the heights of Saints Row 2 Stillwater, but it is in another fucking league compared to Steelport, not to mention the aesthetic. The Row games have never been known for looking particularly impressive, but the reboot offers a nice change on that front. The areas of this game are consistently designed well. Specifically, the lighting is insanely vibrant in tons of areas and missions and all around the city. Do any of you remember those fake-ass leaked videos for GTA 5 with some SUV riding around in the desert? Well, this game actually looks on par with that at times. And that's not an insult, the animation was smooth as hell. Now, the game's not like jaw-droppingly beautiful or anything that the PS4 shouldn't be able to handle, but the game really does look great. Better than a lot. When it works. Now, my biggest worry about this game wasn't the sandbox itself, but how missions, gameplay, and objectives were designed around it. Was the open world just gonna be there as you flew through the main missions? Would they have some way to encourage players to explore and interact with side objectives? With the reboot here, I think they have a really solid idea, but with a very lazy feeling execution. Starting off small here, collectibles are collectibles. The most they do is make the map's UI cluttered and ugly, but other than that, they're not really important or interesting. Now, if you want to 100% this shit, then have fun. Side hustles are essentially the regular activities, like from the rest of the games, and in the spirit of those, they're fine. They're just like quick little activities you can do with nothing really notable here for reasons I'll get into in a second. But the big side stuff comes in the form of your ventures. Eventually in the main story, you'll gain the ability to invest in building businesses, each one having special missions set around the world that will work towards getting you special unlocks and increasing the money you make from them every in-game hour. In other words, like every 5 minutes. I've really liked the implementation of the side activities here. They build actual engagement in the city and what you're doing, and you're constantly being somewhat rewarded while working towards bigger and bigger gains. It's a smart way to disguise and reinvigorate standard crime sandbox affairs. With all that said though, I got the worst sense of deja vu while playing through most of these. It's just like the business work in my other most favorite game, GTA Online mode. Now that game has its own heaping pile of problems, but what kills the business ventures here is the sheer repetitiveness of the tasks you're doing. You have to complete a decent lot of what's basically the same mission in order to complete a business, with not enough being done to make any objectives stand out from one another. The first toxic waste or tow truck task you do is gonna be more or less the same as the last one you do, the only real difference being the distance of the objective. What really makes it all fail though is how similar the majority of the business ventures feel. There are some cool ones thrown in there admittedly, but they're exceptions to a truckload of truck driving missions. It's like this for most of the missions in the game actually. There really isn't a lot of variety in mission design. It's either driving, shooting, or shooting while someone else drives. Granted, most of the Saints Row games have this problem, but the gameplay there was strong enough so that it wasn't as noticeable. I'll get into that in a little bit, but for now, while the open world activities were implemented in the game in a really cool way, the lack of variety really turned these into chores grinds. Despite my worries, the open world is alright. It looks good, it feels good to be in, and despite the business ventures really missing the mark on a great opportunity, this place still leaves you with a lot to do. Santo Ileso is definitely an open world I can fuck with. Granted that the gameplay's still fun. And the game itself actually fucking works. The Saints Row series and proper performance and functionality has never really gotten along. From my personal experience, Saints Row 2 generally ran the worst graphically, while Saints Row 4 and Gat Out of Hell had the most detrimental bugs. But playing the reboot, give or take a few weeks after its initial release, it's worse than both of them in both categories. Frame rate dips are pretty constant, and a lot of animations don't play out the way they're supposed to, but specifically textures are constantly tweaking out for almost every asset in the game, most abundantly with character models and lighting. My guy constantly had clothes and facial features not looking the way they were supposed to, and lighting from any source was pretty sporadic, constantly dipping in and out of dim and ultra bright. All of this is mostly conjecture on what's going on, by the way, like I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but these are just some of the things I've noticed. I said the game looks good when it works, but it's nothing that would justify the insane amount of issues encountered, and it really makes the game look unfinished at times. These are generally glitches on the visual end, but the more serious bugs are kinda interwoven into my problems with the gameplay. The part of this game that let me down the worst by far. Because the gameplay is what made me excited for the release. In my mind, even if this game design felt stuck in the past, and let's be honest, when the game's story sucked ass, I could still rely on Saints Row being a very explosive, very murderous, very stupid good time. Every single game in the series, from the Broke Guy to the Space Emperor, got this right. How could they not? They have a winning formula on their hands. Take GTA, make it snort a suspicious white powder, and boom, Saints Row! I really couldn't see how they could screw up the gameplay. Y'all know where I'm going with this, they screwed up the gameplay. The problems here are a weird mixture of fixing things that weren't broken and absolutely needing to fix everything. There's been a slight overhaul with the systems, specifically gunplay ones, that really didn't need to change and ultimately detract from the experience. To start off though, driving is more or less the same, except with the really cool ability to control how your car maneuvers while airborne. Though drive-by shooting doesn't really happen a lot anymore. It's still an option, but it's never really asked of you. Passenger seat shooting sections are still prevalent, but if you're driving and enemies are on you, sideswiping and crashing into them is how you'll be taking them out. That's a really nice innovation on the regular formula. Honestly, if I heard about this a few months back while playing Saints Row 1, I would have broke down from joy. But like the business ventures, this part really needs more development. The vehicular combat causes a really awkward interruption to the flow of driving, and just generally doesn't feel as good as it could. I also really don't like how you're not allowed to lose enemies naturally, as they're allowed to cheat, spawn behind you, and naturally speed up until you take them out the way they want you to. That's lame. In gunplay though, there's been a lot of weird inclusions and exclusions. For one, human shields were taken out for some reason. Hand-thrown explosives aren't separate weapons anymore, but now special skills that can be used at the expense of a meter, along with limited stat buffs and super moves you unlock. Quick melee takedowns have also been replaced by special takedowns that restore health and recharge every minute or so, as well as the stamina bar having been completely removed. The special skills and extra perks you can attain serve as replacements for the stat upgrades, and there are some more, but these are the biggest changes for me. It was hard to explain at first, but I think most of these changes make this game's combat feel far too stringent for Saints Row. It feels like a lot of the freedom and bombasticness of the combat has been traded in an attempt to create diversity and proper flow and functionality. I'd like to exaggerate that one part again. An attempt. It's like what I said about the driving enemies cheating. They aren't allowed to naturally crash and you aren't allowed to outmaneuver them. They have to be taken out in the proper way. This other example with the grenades specifically annoys me. You can drop a bomb down someone's pants and then throw them, causing them and anyone around the bomb to be blown up. Except for cars. You see, it's less of an actual in-game bomb and more of a skill. and a fairly low level skill at that, so it only does like a quarter of a damage to vehicles. These changes in the system aren't nonsensical though. They could be seen as a way to evolve and add depth on the fairly simplistic formula of the previous games, but all they've done in effect is severely slow down the combat and make the game as a whole much less about chaotic fun, which was kinda one of the most important things about the series. It feels much more in line to a loot shooter than any other Saints Row game. Now personally, this wasn't what ruined it for me. I definitely don't prefer this direction, but I could still squeeze some amount of fun from it. But the glitches feel so linked to the shooting here that I sucked away almost any enjoyment I could find. It feels sloppy, delayed, and unsatisfying. But most damningly is the significant delay between input, activation, and connection. A pause between when you press shoot, when the shot goes off, and when it connects with the target. Most shooting games create a satisfying time frame in which this all connects, but with this game it feels as if it's an online game lagging. By the way, I never played this game in co-op. I did try, no one connected though, so there really isn't any reason it should feel like this. The gameplay isn't terrible in and of itself, but it's comparatively much tamer and less interesting than what came before, making the series' renowned chaos less chaotic. Then the bugginess on top of that just makes it bad. Despite all these problems and shortcomings, the thing that annoys me the most about the Saints Row reboot is how little of an impression the game leaves. As another series during the 7th generation that took so closely after GTA, its biggest necessity to succeed was being special in some way. Altogether, the series was recognized for its in-depth customization and bombastic open-world gameplay, but each game on their own stand out in dramatically different ways, with the first two leaning into being engaging gangster experiences, and the other two being stupid-ass power fantasies. So, in 2022, where almost every other game has customization options for the player, where Ubisoft has milked open-world games for most of their worth, and where fans still get their GTA fix from a 10-year-old online game, what has Saints Row Reboot done to make itself special? Its story ain't remarkable, that's for damn sure. Not once was I immersed, invested, or able to look at these characters, storyline, or world as any more than pieces of a lackluster script. The game city looks nice, but lacks meaningful things to do in it, as the activities are tasteless and it can't even serve as a fun playground since the gameplay has been stripped of the crazy goofiness it was known for. On top of that, glitches are so abundant here, they crumble and crack this already stale experience. And on top of that, even if this game were special in any way, look at this box art! No one can tell regardless! I rarely expect a lot out of upcoming releases, and I can usually find a lot of positive aspects even in the most mid-releases. But as a pretty big fan of the series, the Saints Row Reboot is one of the most disappointing games I've ever played, and pretty easily the worst entry in the series.
Not a bad start.
No. Not bad at all.
I disagree.